First I'm going to underline the verbs, and I'm going to underline these in green. We begin with para, which means prepare or get ready. Then akipe, which literally means receive, but here I've translated it as listen to. In the next line, admonuit, which means has reminded. Refet means it matters. Now this really needs to be translated together with nek, which means and not, and those two words together mean and it doesn't matter. Finally, akipiam means I begin. Now I'm going to highlight in yellow the words in the accusative case. Asem means a penny or a small coin. Auream fabulam, a golden story. And then fabulas, just the plural of fabulam, stories. In the next line, me is also accusative. It's the object of admonuit. It has reminded me. Noa, though, is nominative. Noa is an adjective. It hasn't got a noun agreeing with it, but it refers to a story, and we're translating it as a new one. Finally, a few other words to highlight. In the first line, imo means rather. Priorum means of older ones, of earlier ones. And a qua means literally from which, we might say from which point. So I've translated it as where. Let's start again with the verbs, and again I'm going to underline them in green. We have yakebat, was lying ill. We have wainit, came. Wainerit, again came. Fuarat, had been. Wainit, he came. Saidit, he sat. Nata eset, she had been born. And interrogavit, he asked. In the first line, we have two nouns in the nominative case. These are our subjects. Verania, who was lying ill, and Regulus, who came to her. Impudentiam is accusative. Now Latin uses the accusative for an exclamation. It's as though he's saying, "Oh, look at the impudence of the man." We also have hanc, which is accusative, and that's because of the preposition ad before it, so that those two mean to this woman. And in the next line, igram is accusative, again because of the preposition ad before it, to the sick woman. There are nominatives in the next line, inimikissimus, very unfriendly, and invisissimus, most hateful. Both of these are adjectives, superlative adjectives, describing Regulus, who really hadn't got on at all well with Verania or with her husband. Now also nominative and also agreeing with Regulus is the word proximus in the next line, describing him as he sat next to her on the bed. There it is with ille, the pronoun which goes with it. Now I'm going to use a blue highlighter to pick out just a few of the other words and phrases. So first of all, graviter, seriously, in the first line. Then primum, first of all. It's as though he's got a whole catalogue of complaints against Regulus, and the first thing he wants to mention is his impudence in turning up to visit the sick woman who he'd never liked. Then I'm going to highlight hominis, the genitive of homo, of the man, and this man refers to Regulus. Cujus marito means to whose husband. Marito is a dative of husband, to the husband, and cujus is genitive of qui quae quod. It means of whom. Then I'm going to pick out esto, which means let it be. Here we're translating it as it would have been enough. Tantum, only. Here I've translated it as simply. The whole phrase is, it would have been enough if he'd simply come. Then in the last line, quo die and qua hora are the questions that Regulus asked the old lady. On what day was she born, and at what hour? Verania was lying gravely ill. Regulus came to this woman first, the impudence of the man who came to a sick woman, to whose husband he had been very unfriendly, and to whom herself he had been, and that word fuerat is translated twice in English, very hateful. It would have been enough if he had simply come, but he even sat very close to the bed. He asked in which day, or on which day, at which hour she had been born. Again, I'm going to start by underlining the verbs. There are lots in the first line. First of all, audivit, he heard. Then we have a series of verbs, all of them in the present tense. Componit, he composes. Intendit, he stretches. Movet, he moves. Agitat, he moves quickly, I like he wiggles. And computat, he calculates. Now, although I've translated these in the present tense, I could have used the past tense. Latin has a habit of using the present tense, where English might use the past. It's called the historic present, and it's a means of making the passage seem more vivid. It draws the reader in. When we see historic present, we've got a choice whether we translate in the present or the past. I've chosen the present here, but the past would have been fine. Now, moving on, our next verb is suspended, when he's kept in suspense, the woman. And then we have habes, you are having, inquit, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which means he says, and Latin has a habit of putting that word he says in the middle of some direct speech, whereas in English we put it outside the direct speech. On with the verbs. Evades, you will recover. Liqueat, to put clearly, together with magis, which means more. I've translated this as to put it more clearly, so literally, that this may be more clear to you. Consulam, I will consult. Expertus sum, I have used. Now I'm going to pick out the accusatives and highlight them in yellow. There is vultum, which could mean face. Here I've suggested expression. Oculos, his eyes. Labra, his lips. Digitos, his fingers. In the next line, miseram, just an adjective, but because it's feminine, we know that it means the wretched woman, referring to Verania. In the next line, climactericum tempus, a critical time. He's referring here to her illness. And in the last line, haruspicem, which is picked up again with the word quam, haruspicem is a fortune teller not a very reputable sort of person in ancient Rome, and quam, whom. Now I'll just pick out a few more of the words. First of all, nihil. This is the shortest sentence in your set text, a one-word sentence. Nothing. What he means is he says nothing. After wiggling his fingers and looking at her, probably rather oddly, for a long time, he just says nothing, keeping her in suspense. I'm going to pick out the word due for a long time, again adding to this this notion that he's keeping her hanging there for quite a while. We've spoken before about this phrase. This one is probably one of the hardest phrases in the text. And just to go over it in a bit more detail, so that, ut, you translate that first. Then quod, referring to this matter, what I'm talking about. So that this, then we're going to translate magis and liquiat together, may be more clear to be to you. The word frequenter, this adverb, means frequently, suggesting that he's frequently used a soothsayer before. Again, taking the verbs first, we find that we have a lot of historic presence in this passage. Facit, he makes. Affirmat, he declares. Then for the next verb, the subject is Verania, so poscit means she demands, and scribit means she writes. Ingravescit, she gets worse. Clamat, she shouts. In the first line, congruere is an infinitive, and it's an infinitive because affirmat introduces an indirect statement. Congruere is translated as are in agreement. And just to show you how the indirect statement works, it means he declares that the entrails are in agreement with the meaning or the sign of the stars. And then our last verb is perieraviset, a pluperfect subjunctive, which means who had sworn a false oath. Now let's move on to the words in the accusative case. First of all, sacrificium is the object of facit, he makes a sacrifice. Exter is accusative because it's an indirect statement, as we've seen. Testamentum is accusative because it's the object of poscit, she demands her will. Legatum is accusative because it's the object of scribit, she writes a legacy, so she's leaving something in her will to Regulus. We have three words in the accusative in the next line. Hominem, a man, referring to Regulus. Scelestum and perfidum, I won't bother with the quae, which just means and at the end. Scelestum and perfidum are both adjectives describing Regulus. Scelestum means wicked and perfidum means treacherous. These are all in the accusative because there's a sort of indirect statement here. She shouts that he is a wicked and treacherous man. We also have salutem, which is accusative because it follows the preposition per, on the life of, on the life. It's followed by filii, meaning of his son. There aren't many nominatives, but it's worth picking those out in red now. Credula, credulous, finding it easy to believe. This describes Verania and how in her weakened state she believes all the lies which Regulus tells her. The next and the only other nominative in this passage is moriens, which means dying, as she dies. And it's only because of that word that we know that she dies. And now just a few phrases. Sine mora, without delay. Cum significatione siderum, with the significance or the sign of the stars. In periculo, in danger. I also want to mention a couple of points in the punctuation of the English. You will notice 2 times where I've used a semicolon, where Latin uses a comma. And there, and the other one is here. I used a semicolon because I thought something stronger than a comma was needed. The Latin in those points seems to be missing the word et or and. Pliny's done this for a reason. He's done it to keep his writing very concise. And the effect on the reader is that we're getting perhaps an exciting story, not held up by little conjunctions. Another effect on the reader is that the passage seems to be quite fast-paced. A lot's happening in a short space of time. There are 3 verbs in this section. Facit, he does. Fallit, he cheats. And de testator, a deponent verb, which means he cools down. Regulus is the subject of these verbs, so he's going into the red for nominative. And then for our accusatives, we have eram, the anger, that's the object of de testator. He cools down the anger of the gods. We also have as an accusative caput, which is accusative because it follows the preposition in, upon the head, here perhaps upon the life. It's also important perhaps to pick out the genitives in this passage. Deorum, the anger of the gods, and infelicis pueri, the head or the life here of the unfortunate boy. The boy in question is Regulus' son. Regulus has put his life in danger by swearing on his son's life that what he's saying is true, when in fact it was all lies. Regulus does this often, and when he does it, it's wicked. What Pliny is saying is he acts no less wickedly than he does frequently. Scelerate and frequenter are both adverbs, and another adverb is quotidiae in the next line, which means daily. Every day, daily, he cheats the gods.